In this video, we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel and perpendicular lines. We're going to start off by talking about parallel lines. You see parallel lines all over the place. One of the places you see parallel lines is while you're driving on the road, right? Two lines are parallel. I'm going to draw it in the XY plane. Two parallel lines may look something like this. These two lines here are parallel. All right, and it does look like a road, right? One of the characteristics of parallel lines is that they are two lines that never intersect. All right, that means they're going to go on the same distance apart forever without ever touching, without ever crossing each other. One of the very special characteristics that we're going to be concerned with concerning parallel lines is that there are lines that have the same slope. All right, and the reason why they never intersect is because their rise over their run is the same, right? And so if their rise over their run is the same and they're two distinct lines, they can never intersect. All right, and of course, since vertical lines don't have a slope at all, their slopes are undefined, you can also say vertical lines as well. And that takes care of the lines that don't have slopes. So if you have two vertical lines, then they don't have a slope, so this takes care of that option there. All right, and so what we want to be able to do is look at two lines not in the graphical form, but in the algebraic representation like these two lines here, and determine if they're going to be parallel or not. All right, and so I have these two lines, y equals 3x minus 5 and y equals negative 3x plus 2. Well, for me to determine if they're parallel or not, what I'm going to do is find the slope. The slope of this line right here is 3. Remember, y equals mx plus b. Whatever is multiplied by the x is your slope. So the slope of this line is negative 3. And the slope of this line right here, the slope of that first line is positive 3. And the slope of this second line is negative 3. And since 3 is completely different from negative 3, right? They're not the same. They don't have the same slope. So we'd say that no, these lines are not parallel. All right, if the slopes were the same, then we could say that yes, the lines are parallel. All right. Now we're going to talk about perpendicular lines. All right. Perpendicular lines are lines that actually do intersect, but they intersect to form right angles. And remember, your right angles are your 90-degree angles, kind of like the corner of a square. And so to draw two perpendicular lines in your XY plane, well, your x-axis and your y-axis are perpendicular lines. They intersect to form right angles. And one way to notate right angles when you're drawing lines is to put a little square where the angles actually intersect, or where the lines actually intersect. When it comes to the slope of those perpendicular lines, their slopes are negative reciprocals. Negative reciprocals. All right, the slopes are negative reciprocals, except when we're talking about vertical and horizontal lines, right? If you have a excuse me. If you have a horizontal line and one of your lines is vertical, then you automatically know that they are going to be perpendicular, just like your x-axis is a horizontal line and your y-axis is a vertical line. For all other lines that are not horizontal and vertical, you need to find the negative reciprocal, and sometimes people say the opposite reciprocal, meaning one has to be positive and the other has to be negative if you're looking at their slopes. Before we actually determine if two lines are perpendicular or not, I want to go through the process of determining or finding the negative reciprocal. And so in this first example, I have 3/5, right? We're going to find the negative reciprocal. Remember, your reciprocal means that you're going to invert or flip the fraction, and negative means to do the opposite sign. So since that's a positive 3/5, the negative reciprocal is going to be negative, and if I flip that fraction or invert it, I get 5/3. So if I wanted to create a line that's going to be perpendicular to the line with the slope of 3/5, then I need to make sure that that line has a slope of negative 5/3. Let's go to part B. Notice here I have a negative 4. So its negative reciprocal is going to be positive. And notice that when we have a whole number, we can always write it as a fraction. That's 4 over 1, right? And so if we want to do the reciprocal, it's going to be 1/4. And so the negative reciprocal of -4 is actually 1/4. All right? And so these two are the negative reciprocals of those given numbers. All right? And so now that we know about negative reciprocals, let's move on to determine if two lines are perpendicular. I have the line y equals x plus 7 and y equals negative x plus 3. All right. Well, I'm going to first look at the slope of this line right here. Remember, your slope is whatever is in front of your x when your equation is written in y equals mx plus b form. And so in front of that x is a 1. All right. And the slope of the second line, well, what's understood to be in front of the x is a -1. And so if I want to find out if they're negative reciprocals, well, 1 and -1, those are a little hard to tell because the numbers are the same, but one is the opposite of the other. So we got that negative part correct, but what about the reciprocal part? Well, if you notice, the reciprocal of +1 is 1 because it's 1 over 1, right? And so if I do the reciprocal of -1, I mean, it'll still be, of this one, it'll still be over 1. And so if you notice, I got a positive 1 over 1 and a negative 1 over 1. They're negative reciprocals, right? Because you flip the fraction, you still get the same numbers, 1 and 1. And so these two would be considered perpendicular. So we'd say yes, perpendicular. And so this one is a little bit harder to look at because of the ones, but we've done it. In this last example that we're going to look at in this video, we're going to determine if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. All right, and so what I want to do is just tell me which one is it. Is it parallel, is it perpendicular, or neither? And so what I've got to do is find the slope of these lines, right? So I'm going to come here. Well, that's in y equals mx plus b form. So for me to find the slope, all I have to do is look at the number in front of the x, which is 4. Now, when I get to this other example with the 8x plus 2y equals 4, what I'm going to have to do is I'm actually going to have to get this equation in y equals mx plus b form. So what I've got to do is solve for y, right? Because I want it in y equals mx plus b form so I can find the slope. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 8x from both sides. When I subtract 8x, I'm going to get 2y equals, and I'm going to write the negative 8x first so I can get it in true y equals mx plus b form. That is not a necessary thing that you have to do. But I'm going to next divide both sides by 2, and so I'm going to get y equals. Notice I have to divide both the negative 8x and that positive 4 by 2. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4, so I get a negative 4x. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. All right, and so the slope of this line would be -4. Well, to determine if they're parallel, I got to see if the slopes are the same. Well, the slope of this line is a +4, and the slope of this line is a -4. That is not the same, so they would not be considered parallel. Now to go to perpendicular, right? The slope of this line is 4, and the slope of this line is -4. That means they are not negative reciprocals. They are opposite or negatives, but they are not reciprocals. All right? And so since that's a -4 and that's a +4, I know that they're not perpendicular, and so that means that they are neither. All right? And that concludes this video.